It used to take maybe years to train a neural network. And with these new techniques, it could take like months. Since then, now you can train a neural network of that size in like 2 minutes.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Ancient Baths himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, what's going on, man?
Oh, man. Yes, you remembered.
You really shoved it in my face. I think you talked about it a lot, so I had to remember.
A friend of the podcast, Mallory, and I just went to Chicago. I'm back in Columbus now, but we went to Chicago for a long weekend. And one of the activities that I planned, she planned almost the entire trip, but I planned a couple of things, one of which didn't happen. And the other that did happen is this Ancient Baths trip that you're talking about at Aire? A-I-R-E.
It looks like air with a silent E. That's what I'm going with.
I listened to a YouTube review of it, and they kept saying Aire, but not quite. They said it better. I'm failing in some way, but I can't figure out how. It was awesome. So great. So
you failed at saying the name, but you succeeded at actually going to the place and enjoying yourself. You got a massage? Is that what happened? I don't really know what happened. Explain to me.
Yeah, so these baths, which claim to be Roman and Greek baths, I believe, there are a bunch of different experiences that you can enroll into. You choose your experience in the space. And the one that I chose for Mallory and I was a couples experience. And we had a 45-minute massage, followed by almost 2 hours of exploring something like 5 or 6 different types of baths in the space, different temperatures, different salt content. There were steam rooms, there was ice plunges. It was awesome. And Mallory has never had a positive massage experience in her life, which is more of a commentary on me as a boyfriend than anything else. But she loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Do you think there's video floating around of you guys floating around? Do they
I don't think so.
No experiential kind of campaigns going on inside the bathhouse?
They might. I was not aware of any cameras in the space. I didn't see any of them. You are not allowed to have your phone in the bath itself. It was awesome. It was just like you really lose. I mean, they have on the marketing materials like time does not exist here. You lose track of time. It's just a really relaxing, dim, awesome experience.
It sounds like you were delighted, and today's guest is all about delighting customers of retail. So this is my stretch to get us to today and get you out of thinking about your massage.
It wasn't even a stretch. It was a slam dunk.
It's a slam dunk that I hit off the back of the rim.
Speaking of good experiences within physical spaces, today we are speaking with Everett Berry, the founder and CEO of Perceive. Perceive is a consumer behavior analytics company for non-digital or physical spaces using 3D cameras and artificial intelligence. The company was founded in 2015. It's based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Finally diving into our neighbors to the west. Eric, we're going to get some buzzwords on this one. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about machine learning.
As you know, whenever I hear the terms machine learning and AI, Jay, I'm going to swear here, my bullshit detector goes off. So I'm going to come in a little skeptical, but I just want to hear about the background. What is really happening behind the scenes, behind the two big buzzwords of the day?
Well, in an effort to soothe your bullshit meter, Perceive has raised $1.2 million in grants, most of which came from the National Science Foundation in the form of an SBIR grant. So I'm guessing there's some hard science involved here, Eric, and I'm excited about it. We get a little excited when hard science comes on the podcast. And applying it to the real world physical spaces. I don't know what the future of physical spaces is. I don't know if they're on the rise, on the decline. It seems like they've been on the decline for a while, but I'm not sure what the latest is.
I can tell you one thing, they will exist.
That's true. All right, guys. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this interview as we go through it. Feel free to tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm. We'll get into that interview with Everett. Eric, how many people have you assisted in hiring?
I used to do some interviews back in the day, hiring for a business fraternity. And now I do some interviews hiring for my full-time job. So I'd say I probably had a part in hiring or bringing on at least 100 people.
How many of those people did you do the work of actually finding to bring into interview?
It's way too much work, Jay. I don't do that. That's too much.
It's a lot of work to find high quality talent to come in an interview, and our friends at Integrity Power Search help you do just that. They are the #1 full stack, high growth startup recruiting firm between the coasts. They partner with venture capitalists, private equity groups, and CEOs to build amazing teams for the world's most disrupting companies. Eric, since 2012, Integrity Power Search has executed over 600 searches, and they're on track to do more than 200 in 2019 alone. That means high quality candidates in front of you that you can interview without having to source them yourself.
600 sounds like way more than 100.
Way more than 100, and think about all the hours saved not finding those candidates yourself. So if you guys are interested in working with Integrity Power Search, you can go to upside.fm/integrity to learn more about their team and how they can help you with your hiring. Everett, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
On Upside, we like to start with a background of the founder. Can you tell us about the history of Everett?
Sure. So I grew up in Indiana, went to Purdue, and I studied computer engineering there. And specifically, I worked on an area called multimedia systems, which is kind of video, images, and how you build large systems that handle various kinds of media. And in doing that, I started working on a project where we were looking at live streaming cameras from all around the world, and also on Purdue's campus. Purdue has this interesting thing where, at least when I was there, they had live video feeds for a number of spaces like labs, kind of union, common areas. So I started writing programs to look at these video feeds and try to pick out like how many people were in the feed, how long was the line for coffee, how crowded were labs or dining areas. And from there, I kind of took the engineering track all the way into product and then eventually the CEO and founder role of Perceive.
It seems obvious to me that a lot of those video feeds are probably set up for purposes of security. Were there other reasons that there are live video feeds that you were tapping into?
I don't know why they are publicly accessible. I think it's probably just a university setting, and I should say they're accessible within the intranet. And I guess I should also say I don't know if this is still the case. But regardless, it kicked off a string of interesting thoughts for me and the folks I was working with back then. And it led us to start thinking about what else we could do with these feeds that might be commercially useful.
How did you come about writing software to be like, this is a human? I've always been fascinated by that.
Yeah, so it's a very challenging problem, actually. That's part of the thing that attracted me to it. The core problem is actually one that we also experience, which is that it's sometimes hard to tell what's a person and what's not a person, and if you're far away from someone or even if you're just looking at a video feed. The trick is to kind of come up with some useful approximations. For example, like in a retail store, almost all the moving objects are people, right? There's no horses or things running around. So you can do some engineering things. And I think I really just enjoyed the problem of saying, well, could we get 90% people, 92% people? And there's a variety of tricks. It's a whole massive field. And actually, in recent years, it's become much, much easier, which is one of the reasons I think this company is possible at all.
Why has it become easier?
So there's been a number of breakthroughs in AI and machine learning, and a lot of people are familiar with this by now. But just to recap, in 2012, this new style of training came out, which allowed people to not only accurately detect things on kind of a big data set of images, like you could detect a tiger and a boat and that sort of thing. But the key thing was you could take that network that we trained and apply it to other images and video that we hadn't seen before, and it would still work, which is called transfer learning, which was actually a massive breakthrough. And so we no longer had to write basically a custom thing where we would say, okay, maybe a person is 6 feet tall or 5 feet tall and they're roughly this shape and size. We could actually just give these algorithms pictures of people and objects, and the algorithm would figure out internally what it felt those people should look like. And so that has made this whole field of computer vision, it's called, just much more accessible in recent years. And I think that's also why you see an explosion of companies in this area, including Perceive.
Talk to me like I'm even dumber. So this 2012 new training that came out, is that something that somebody else had trained and they said, hey, we're opening this up and making it open source, you can use it? Or is that a new breakthrough in computing in general?
It was several things. We could probably be here for a long time. The basic idea was the graphics cards in your computer, which you might use to play video games, or actually it's handling all of the streaming of this podcast and the video associated with it. Some researchers were able to use those to run a neural network, which made a previously very difficult problem much more attainable. So for example, it used to take maybe years to train a neural network, and with these new techniques, it could take like months. Since then, now you can train a neural network of that size in like 2 minutes on a reasonably powerful computer. So there was a big breakthrough there. And the other piece was there was some sort of like algorithm or maybe design improvements to the way that we built the software, that the way that we taught these networks what a person looked like, that made it work much better. So those two things combined, and 2012 was sort of this watershed moment in AI. And it's what's led to essentially everything that followed. We still use more or less the same techniques now that were developed back then.
What's the biggest unsolved problem in computer vision right now?
Yeah, so that is a great question. I would say it is, for me, the largest unsolved problem, and there's probably some debate about this, is recognizing what's happening in video. If you take a single image, you can run that whole thing through and decide what's in that image. Like there's a face or a boat or a person. If you take a sequence of images and you're trying to decide what's happening, like is someone driving? Are they walking? Is a person shopping? That problem is we still don't have a good way to solve that. And so for me, that's the largest unsolved problem. It's actually the thing we started with at Perceive way back when it was more of a research company. And that's where we go from there. I'm sure many people would have different answers to that question.
Remember that like passing the basketball thing, the video, and the gorilla like walks by in the background because humans have like a problem focusing on multiple things at once? Do computers have the same limitation?
No. So it's one of the things that makes Perceive, I think, just a fascinating company to work on. And one of the things that makes us so exciting, makes our product so exciting, is that if I asked you to watch video for a long time, or I asked you to pick out the gorilla on the first try, you would struggle with it. And our brains are not meant to do some of these tasks. So they're not meant to stay alert for a long time. Even as I'm talking with you guys, I'm actually looking all around the room and thinking about 10 things. And I probably couldn't even tell you what I said 2 sentences ago. So computers don't have this issue. And that's one of the great things about computers that we've used for files and internet and all of that. And due to those breakthroughs I was just talking about, we're now able to apply it to things like watching video, which is super, super powerful and is leading to just a huge number of products that are actually saving people a lot of kind of grudging work. It's not a fun job to sit and watch video for hours and hours and hours a day.
I have one more kind of basic question before I dive deeper into Perceive and your story there. We've talked about AI, we've talked about machine learning. You went to Purdue to learn multimedia systems. How did you start to learn how to use things like neural nets? Was that part of formal education, or was that personal interest that you had to dive into some of these buzzwordy topics that are kind of in the zeitgeist?
Yeah, so I was just pretty lucky, I think, when I was a freshman when these things came out, and I started working on this project kind of the year later, when some of the software was more accessible. So it was just a coincidence of time. And if you were in computer vision at that time, that was definitely something that you were at least trying, if not actively working on. So that was really fortunate. And then I think the other thing that's been fortunate is just how well it all works. I mean, it really does work amazingly well. And so there's a lot of questions about AI in general as a society, but I can tell you from an engineering standpoint, it is a massive breakthrough and has worked really well for some of the things that Perceive is working on.
So we're sitting there, we're looking at closed caption television around campus, and we're saying there's this many people in the coffee line at the cafe. What's the next step of that on the way to perceive?
Yeah, it's a long story. So perceive is actually almost more than 6 years old at this point in terms of conceptual concept and working on it. The next thing we did was we said, in order to bring some of this technology to the world, everyone knows the best way to bring interesting products out is to commercialize them. And so we started looking for ways to commercialize some of the software we were writing or some of the ideas we were thinking about. And we ended up interviewing a huge number of people in retail and businesses where it seemed logical that like this kind of thing could be useful. And we settled on a specific set of problems in retail. And then we ended up writing these NSF grants. So there's this thing called an NSF SBIR grant. And I actually received this the week I graduated. So the week I graduated, the NSF was like, here's $250,000 to go start this company, which was kind of a trip. And that is how Perceive got started. I was planning on working on it anyway that summer and into the fall and seeing how far we could take it. But we ended up funding the company right away. And that sort of kickstarted everything that followed. And so, yeah, very grateful to the NSF that they saw the promise that we were talking about.
If you're in the shoes of the NSF and they're awarding SBIRs and they get the Perceive application, generally my perspective has been that SBIR or NSF grants go towards things that they see as impacting society in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it about the application for Perceive? Because you could see where I could see where this is a very capitalistic commercialized product.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the application like, and what do you think they saw in that application?
Yeah, sure. So there's another, you talked about the gorilla video. There's another video I love on the internet, which we actually incorporated in this TEDx talk we did, where there's a very busy pool. There's probably like 150 kids in this pool, and one of them is drowning at the whole time the video is playing. And it's impossible to see which one it is. You could play that video on loop and probably not see them 5 times in a row. And eventually the lifeguard jumps in and saves the kid. So, when you think about lifeguarding, that is totally an application of what I was talking about, where you just have this sort of arduous job of keeping track of 100 different moving, splashing bodies. And you're required to be pretty vigilant, pretty alert. And in the end, some kid's life is maybe at stake. With a tool like Perceive and some of the software that we're working on, you would be able to first spot that kid sooner, and second, probably save them before there's any type of alarm or damage or anything like that. And so the idea of observing the people and spaces that we work in has wide-ranging applications. So you can imagine, for example, a city street where there's someone jaywalking and the car doesn't see them, or any number of sort of emergency situations or safety situations. Another one that we talked about sometimes is a lecture hall where some kids are cheating on an exam, right? So there's a number of societal applications for this technology. I want to actually take one side tangent here, which is something I get asked about a lot. We are not building a technology that is trying to surveil people. And so what we've done with the software specifically is built-in privacy protections, from stripping faces out on the devices to there's no Wi-Fi tracking, there's no sort of large-scale recognition or identification used. But for these applications I'm talking about, where there's sort of unfairness or people's maybe even lives are on the line, a tool that could assist us in understanding the spaces and people around us would be extremely impactful. So that is where the societal impact of this is going. And I think, given that we continue to be successful, we will eventually build products for those situations too.
What was the progression of your own thinking of the commercial application of this? Where did you think it would start? Where did it actually start? Where's it going? Where did you think it was going to go?
Yeah, so we have pivoted the product twice. And actually, a lot of this has been just a function of retail in general. Alongside my interest in computer vision, I've developed a very strong interest in retail. And it's a space that more than almost any market has been shifting and changing rapidly. And so when we started, we were working on sort of a old style of retail application where there's analytics and you try to understand how you can rearrange the store and do these types of things. What we eventually realized was that trying to optimize your space to increase transactions and do these types of things is just a very challenging product to bring to market. And oftentimes the things that you need to do to increase your brand loyalty, increase your purchasing doesn't really align with what you might get out of the technology, I guess I'd say. And so we've shifted a lot into focusing on experiences, delivering great experiences to people, making sure that customers are highly engaged in the space, even if they're not purchasing. And so there's been a great evolution on just kind of an engineering focus like metrics and science thing to more of a product focus around helping these businesses actually solve what is the real problem for them, which is delivering a differentiated experience.
Can you give me some specifics, maybe like a case study or example that puts that more into context?
Yeah, sure. So we've worked with a number of retailers over the years. I'll talk about one in particular. We did some work with a small cosmetics chain. And what we found there was that in cosmetics and natural wellness, engaging the customer is extremely important. Everyone that walks in, if they're looking for natural beauty products or these types of things, typically they're very curious buyers. They want to know what the ingredients are. They want to know where it was sourced, what the founder of the product story was, these types of things. And so you can work on moving your visitors along sort of a funnel where you engage them, maybe you let them browse around, you offer them a demo, you offer them some samples. So we helped a cosmetics chain really optimize the experience that they were delivering for customers, which they wanted to deliver anyway, but then the data showed, it didn't always happen. And so it's kind of a very concrete thing. If you look at the space in general, it's been a tremendous year for these types of things. There have been launches like the Capital One Cafe, Disney at Target, Story at Macy's, and all of these experiences are focused on kind of delighting the customer, surprising the customer, making their experience just really a memorable thing. And the assumption is, and I think it's borne out in the data, that when you do this to customers, when you actually align their interests with yours, this leads ultimately to more loyalty, to higher spending, whether it's online or somewhere else, and kind of everyone's happy. And so that's the type of visitor-centric analytics that we're working on right now.
To go back to this cosmetics example, can you give me sounds like the problem was they wanted to engage the customer at the point where the customer may have some interest. Can you talk about what installing Perceive looked like, what it did for them practically, and what the results of that were?
Absolutely. So we've done kind of an interesting thing with Perceive, and that is the sensors themselves, which are commodity essentially, they click into lighting fixtures. And so there's actually no drill required or Ethernet or some of the annoying, painful parts of installing a normal security system. So if you're a business that has some sort of physical experience that you're trying to give folks, you more or less just pop them in and then use the software. What the software does is it lets you run these little studies. So there's obviously a massive world of analytics you could find out. There's a tremendous amount of interesting things in a space, and everyone is curious. But the software sort of helps you pick a couple key points and design your experience that you want for customers in the software. And then it basically measures whether you're adhering to that or not. And so you might say, well, we want to approach every customer within 30 seconds, or maybe we want to let them browse for 3 minutes first, or for a reasonable period of time. So you can set all these things up in the software, and then the pretty amazing part of the technology is that it takes care of all the rest for you. So you can think of like watching a video of the store with a stopwatch and a clipboard, writing down what happens. Perceive does that automatically, and it gives you all these amazing workflows to help you really make sure that customers are getting an awesome experience.
I'm going to dial this back, or dial it in even further. You mentioned this standing in the store and having a clipboard and having a timer. Before we can fully understand how Perceive is changing the current state of the art, can you explain what the current state of the art is that people are doing in these spaces to understand?
Yeah, sure. So a good example of this is a museum, actually. Most galleries will do a visitor engagement study, or kind of a timing and interaction study, where they'll actually follow, from a distance, they'll follow people around and sort of write down how long they spend in certain areas, what engages them, what doesn't. And they'll do this for maybe like 50 visitors over the course of a several month gallery. A museum is a good example because you can imagine there's sort of different areas that people engage with, and et cetera, et cetera. So the same process happens within most retail businesses and other businesses, whether it's evaluations or they hire an outside firm or something like that. And all of that today is done with basically a clipboard and stopwatch, and it's done in a very sporadic way. If there's no one in the store and that's your day to be observing, right? You're just there. So there's a number of sort of inefficiencies in this process, and sort of a very small sample of data that people are relying on. And the software more or less replaces that for you. It lets you basically run and optimize your store like you would a digital experience. And it doesn't have to be a retail store. I guess I'd say that it's really for any type of showroom where there's some kind of concrete thing happening. And so, yeah, and then, typically maybe you replace the clipboard with an iPad, so that's slightly better. And you kind of collect the data and think about, what does this mean? And let's say you want to change one of the things you were doing. Well, you can never go back and say, okay, well, I want to reobserve from a week ago, right? It's already been done. Whereas with Perceive, you can rerun the study. Essentially, you can change the parameters. So it really sort of digitizes the physical environment that you have, and kind of going back to the original mission of the company, it gives you all these tools to understand the space and how people are engaging with it.
How does this scale at, like, for one location? Like, can this can be used at like a small boutique cosmetic shop, but can it be used at like a Walmart supercenter?
There's no technical reason why it can't be used at something like a Walmart, but the experience that a larger store or department store is delivering their customers is different. So with a big box store, probably the number one thing that is the focus in most customers there is price, and everyone in that location is going to buy something. So it's actually a very different type of analytics to work on. So we largely specialize in things where there's very tight experience that is supposed to be delivered for customers, very engaging and sort of loyalty building thing that is happening.
When we talk about analytics, I know there are some analytics tools, and maybe this has changed over the past 4 years since I've stopped looking at it so closely, but there are some analytics tools that you track these things called events, right? Where you specify, when this happens, log this as 1, this happened. I've run into some tools where if I want to change the event I'm measuring, I can only start recording affirmations on that event after I specify that event has happened. Does Perceive record everything and allow me to run queries on everything that has ever been recorded? Or do I have to define my events to start calculating if that is actually happening, if this experience is actually happening as I want it to?
Yeah, so the system builds kind of a map of the store or of the environment and everything that happens inside it. And that map exists for all the time that the system's in place. And so if you want to build a new study or build a new experiment, as we call them, you can do that for the whole breadth of data that's available. And it's actually one of the most powerful features that customers like, is that they're not, if I want to go compare from a year ago, I can do that. And this is especially salient in a physical environment where things are perhaps changing at a slower pace. And like in retail, probably the most important metric for a location is same store year-over-year sales. And so we're seeing some shift away from that, but still, when you want to cover like a long time span of time, that's where one of the areas where we really shine.
Okay, so before I keep going down deeper, in case it wasn't clear, can you just share with the audience how you would explain Perceive and the breadth of what it provides now?
Sure. And so, speaking of the entrepreneurial journey, this is always evolving, but Perceive is an experience analysis toolkit, and it automates most of the functions that you would do with a clipboard and pencil out in a physical experience. And so you can think about something like the Capital One Cafe or Disney at Target, delivering a great experience to customers where there's a strong idea of what should be happening in the space. Perceive helps businesses measure and improve that.
I was just in San Francisco a couple weeks ago and was at the Capital One Cafe there. For listeners who have not visited, can you explain what that experience is like and why that has come up a couple of times now?
Sure. Well, it's just a cafe, but it's run by Capital One, and so if you want to go there and have a coffee, totally cool. Have a meeting, but maybe you want to go there and solve some banking issue and also chill out for a sec. So it's this whole idea, which I think is really a positive change, that we are generally happier as people and more engaged as customers if we are engaging in some experience and we are having sort of an ulterior purpose for being in the space. And so that's what Capital One's delivering. And then obviously, you'd hope that they're opening checking accounts and that sort of thing.
If I'm a customer of Perceive, what am I getting? Like, I get reporting, give me a little bit more, what am I buying?
Generally, the way people interact with the system is they set up experiments, they receive reports and notifications, and we've built in workflows to sort of help organizations filter the data to the appropriate people. It's sort of this, like, if you imagine someone again with a clipboard and a pencil, and then they call their boss and say, "Hey, so here's what we found. What should we do about this?" The system sort of delivers that.
Earlier, you used the example of if I want to approach every customer within 3 seconds or let them browse for 3 minutes first, does the system push someone towards intervention in real time when certain things are happening? Or is it, hey, this is what we observed happened. You may want to put a focus on your staff changing this behavior because it's not meeting expectation?
Yeah, so today it is offline. And so I think we will get to kind of a real-time situation, and that's going to enable a whole host of amazing things. But today it's sort of available next day.
How does Perceive make money?
So we charge a monthly subscription for the service. It's very much meant to be kind of feel like a software product, even though there's a lot of deep technology underneath. And then occasionally we will run kind of custom queries for folks and help them answer custom questions.
How do you price something like this?
We think about it like it's about maybe 5 to 10x cheaper than commissioning a study to do this from an outside firm, from an outside marketing firm. And so if you're a space kind of showroom or something like that, you're going to pay somewhere north of probably $100,000, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, depending on the scope of the study, to figure out a lot of this information. So with Perceive, you're gonna pay a fraction of that and have constant access to the information, ability to change it, rerun it, all the benefits of software and automation. So that's how we think about pricing the software. Generally, it's kind of a marketing tool that folks are buying.
When I commission a study, am I also paying for them to give me like a report to say, this is how we break down what we found? Or are they just kind of providing the raw data and then the company does the analysis themselves?
So I've seen both, depending, and that is a price differentiator in these studies. I think if there's an analysis that accompanies it. Generally, what we have found is that we're experts in the data and in capturing and understanding some of these spaces, and our clients are generally the experts in working with that. But that said, we do sometimes help them answer custom queries or do fun little things, and that also actually has fed its way into features for the product as well.
Are your customers generally permanent retail shops or shops that exist year round, or are they pop-up shops?
Yeah, so we have a few that are large national chains, and then one or two that are kind of more pop-ups. It can be used both ways. The pop-ups are good and bad because obviously as a software company, you want to have a revenue stream that's kind of consistent. That said, one of the great strengths of the product is that it is a great tool for experimentation. And so we are still finding our way in this area, but I think as we see retail shifting into more of a pop-up experimental phase, especially in the physical world, we're going to see a lot more usage around sort of the potential temporary, easy to set up, tear down nature of the product.
So we have retail chains, we have pop-ups, you mentioned museums. What are the other segments of potential customers for Perceive?
So this is getting into my kind of read on what's happening. I think what we saw in retail in the last 20 years was purchasing became a sort of utilitarian thing that was much easier to do online, much more convenient for customers, et cetera. And so the types of things that people were doing in physical space, and this is more or less echoing some of the thought leaders in the retail space, is they were using their footprints as a customer acquisition channel or even a media channel. You can imagine if you have 100 million visitors a year and you have them in the store for 20 minutes, the advertising value of that time is almost infinite. You could not buy someone's attention at that scale from an advertising firm. So the physical footprint of retail has changed. I actually think the same thing is happening in restaurants right now. And so there's a number of interesting companies. Some of them, a lot of them are in LA, I think. Cloud Kitchens is one, where you're seeing not only the delivery of the food from restaurants, but the actual whole vertical making of the food shifting into a total delivery model where people just receive it at their door, and it's super convenient. It's more centralized, a number of good benefits. And then finally, you have events, which are changing from maybe like a pure marketing tool into kind of like a sales tool, where if you have a physical footprint and you host community events like they do at the Apple Store, this is an amazing way to get people involved in the product. And so I actually think that sort of events, restaurants, and retail are all converging into a general space of experiences. And what businesses are going to need to be able to do is measure ROI on that, make sure they're amazing for customers, and make sure that they know that channel is working for them and is right for their customers. And so I think if you look at video analytics companies today, most of the websites, and I think our website is guilty of this too, actually, but they have like 3 or 4 separate industries that they provide solutions for, quote unquote. And I think what you're going to see with experiences is that all of these converge into some of the same things, and then brands are going to put their own creative spin on these spaces. And so that's where I see perceived market going. Today, we are just focused on showrooms, which is, you can imagine, kind of a retail store or a gallery of some sort, car dealership. And these are all places where you show off products. People don't necessarily buy them there. They don't necessarily have to, but when they're in there, you definitely want them leaving with the most positive impression of your brand that you can give them. So that's kind of the now and the later of our market.
You mentioned measuring ROI as a brand, as a business, as someone who's putting on these experiences. How instrumental are you in actually putting together that ROI data, or like what data are you giving them to help them with that calculation? And is it all of it or just some of it?
The first thing we'll do is we'll help them input basically a cost per square footage into our system. This is actually still an experimental part of the product. And so we are trying to figure out beyond the obvious sort of costs per square footage, which is building an operation and remodeling every couple of years. How do you think about the value of someone getting a great experience in your space? Many brands may not have a great answer for this. Sometimes the answer is just to pick a number and go from there, because then you can drive it up or down. And so we are still experimenting with businesses on kind of the right way to deliver this. Generally, we're experts in the data, setting up the system, helping people really understand what kinds of things are causing what kinds of behavior in the space. And then, they're experts in their business and their brand. And so we want to sort of meet them in the middle.
How do you quantify a great experience?
So generally, it's going to come down to engagement. And again, there's a whole sort of psychology line that you could take on this. But what we generally say is when people are standing at attention, engaged with an associate, with marketing materials, with some display, they're engaged in the experience. And then how long they spend there is actually dependent on what kind of experience you're trying to deliver. So if it's a buy online, pick up in store situation, and then there for 10 minutes, that's actually a bad experience, right? They should be getting in and out very fast. If it's a showroom and they spend a lot of time physically engaged with the current products, that's a good indication that they are having a positive experience. One other thing on that is we have a particular technology, which is have actually developed a way to sort of measure the attention that customers are giving the space or the person inside it. And so, we want to try to differentiate between people that are just there, like not facing anything or on their phones or something, and people that are actively engaged in the experience. And that's going to be pretty important for, I think, any analytics in this category.
What's the biggest win you've heard from a customer who's using Perceive?
Yeah, so we helped one of our customers save like $50,000 on a new interactive element that they were adding to their showroom that was not returning the engagement that they were expecting. In fact, actually, what we see with interactive elements in general is that it does require a lot of thought to design good ones, and sometimes interactive elements become basically non-interactive. And so, pretty much the immediate thing that people do is they save a lot of money in their marketing budgets, and they allocate it more intelligently to things that are really positively impacting their customer experience. And then, yeah, there's a number of longer term effects. Obviously, ROI is always something that people are after, but that's kind of the biggest immediate right away win that we've seen.
How long does it take to onboard a new customer or client?
Generally within a month. So the actual install piece is very straightforward. The thing that can take a little bit longer is understanding from them is the product right for them. So depending on your level of sophistication and really the things that you're after, we have fallen in the trap in the past, which I think is common with new entrepreneurs, of working with clients where it's more of a nice to have instead of a need to have. So we try to spend a lot of time these days really understanding the processes inside the organization that are going to lead to them utilizing the tool in a positive way for them.
How are you finding clients right now, or how are they finding you?
So it's all been word of mouth right now. We are starting to experiment a little bit, and I think post a seed round, this will be a bigger piece of it with some more rigid kind of channels and methods. But right now, it's been sort of network effects and word of mouth.
So you got the SBIR 1 grant you mentioned earlier on the interview, and I think you also got the SBIR 2, the follow-on. Is that correct?
Yep.
What's the next step for you guys? Is there an SBIR 3, or are you now fully on your own to fund this thing? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we've been kicked out of the nest, so to speak. The thing that we're doing currently is working on a small angel round, not particularly for the capital, which is obviously capital is always a concern for a young company, but we are in decent shape there. But we are working on, we really want to get some knowledgeable individuals in the company and people that really have seen this space from both sides, people that have built companies before, or individuals that can contribute in a way in helping us kind of structure future investments. And so we're running a small angel round right now, and then I expect next year we will do a seed round.
How big's your team currently?
It's myself and 3 engineers.
And when you say doing the small angel round, that's bringing people on in an advisory aspect or bringing on more people onto the team?
Generally an advisory aspect. We have definitely had various people lend their expertise and we paid them for it. But generally it's going to be an advisory aspect to start. If folks can really contribute and they can put in 20 hours a week and really produce for us, then yeah, we've also done consulting work.
So the team right now is 4 engineers. What's your next big hire? What would really add to that team at this point?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would like to hire a sales-focused product person. So someone that can take a lot of the customer meetings that I'm taking right now and work with them and work with our team to sort of build and tweak features that just continue to drive home the value of the product. And so that's the role I occupy currently. There's a number of great folks that I know that could do that. But I think we just want to have a little bit more of a process in place before we start to think about scaling that.
And then one kind of random question here for me: what do you do with all the data?
Yeah, so all the video gets deleted in general. That some customers want to leave it on, and sometimes they post signs, and so we leave that up to them. But in general, the video gets deleted by default. The data sticks around as for the length of the time that we'll work with someone, and of course that enables them to go back and run experiments and all that stuff. That's really the extent of it. It's like you have a CRM and you've input all your sales leads over the last 4 years into it, and they just sit there, right? So,
who owns the data, you or the client?
So the client owns the video data for sure. Currently, we, as part of the software model, we sort of lease the rights to use the actual data that we kind of did work to produce the analytical data.
So Everett, you're sitting in the Indianapolis IoT lab, I think, if I recall that correctly. We haven't talked to a lot of companies from Indianapolis. So why is Indianapolis the right place for Perceive to continue to build and grow?
So there's a number of reasons to be here. First of all, if you're a software company, particularly if you're building a marketing software of any type, there is huge amount of expertise in this area in building that type of software. For us, we have access to amazing research universities close by. So Purdue University, University of Illinois, and very strong business universities. So Notre Dame and IU. So it's actually really kind of a central place to build and grow a engineering and operations team. And then, the value is extremely high. I mean, we had a more or less fully staffed AI company for 3 years on under $1 million in funding. So that will be gone within 9 months in the Bay Area. So there's a number of great reasons to have a company in Indianapolis. And I think our timing has been fortunate because the startup ecosystem has sort of exploded here over the length of time that we've been a company.
Awesome. Well, if people want to learn more about you or Perceive after the show, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can always email me. It's Everett at Perceive Inc. So the domain is perceiveinc.com, which is 2 EIs, so heads up for that. And yeah, I'm very fast on email, generally respond quickly. And then, if you'd like to find out about the company itself, we're on Twitter, and we also have our website, perceiveinc.com. And generally, media and that kind of thing gets posted there by our social media manager. So those are all great resources to find out about the company.
How much are the wasabi peas you buy at Kroger?
I think they are about $5, maybe $3.99.
That's pretty expensive for a little snack.
Just a little snack, but the value is there, and I think it's worth it.
How do you afford that on a podcaster's budget?
It's tough. I got to dig deep, and I got to lean on my other business sometimes.
Well, you know what? I think the listeners could help us out here because there's one thing that they could do that directly correlates with our ability to raise some advertising revenue on this platform.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Oh yeah, I'm going to upside.fm/survey. It is our 2019 listener survey, and it is a key part of our growth strategy here at Upside, so we can keep on telling stories about founders, community builders, and venture capitalists outside of Silicon Valley. And we can get Jay some more wasabi peas.
That's right. So, dear listener, if you would do us a solid, if you would do us a kindness, please head over to upside.fm/survey. Answer our 2019 listener survey. It should only take a couple of minutes. Myself and my wasabi peas, thank you. All right, Eric, we just spoke with Everett Berry, the founder and CEO of Perceive. At the beginning of this show, you talked about the buzz terms AI and machine learning triggering your BS meter. How do you feel now?
I think the 6 years of research in an academic setting and Everett's ability to kind of paint the history of the space going back to the watershed moment of 2012 gave me a lot of comfort around those buzzwords.
Yeah, I think some of the folks who give AI and ML kind of a bad name in terms of just using it as terms, they like to talk around questions and talk a lot but say nothing. And that wasn't at all the sense I got from this interview. Everett was giving us very specific answers to the questions that we were asking and talking to me like I'm dumber when I requested it. So we get even more specific answers.
I love when people talk to you like you're dumb. It's probably one of my favorite things.
Hey, I'm here as an advocate for the listener, and I want to make sure there is no listener left behind.
Wait, are you calling our listeners dumb?
No. But what I am saying is I don't know as much about our listeners as I would like, which is why, dear listener, you should go to upside.fm/survey and fill out that listener survey that we mentioned earlier in the show so we can find out more about you and find out if I need to make myself smarter or if I need to continue to ask questions of our guests to simplify things.
Wow, Jay. What a plug. Man, we didn't even plan that.
What a plug. So, Eric, here we are in our deal memo. We can talk about Everett as a founder. We can talk about Perceive as a company, the opportunity ahead of it. Where do you want to start?
Before I get to Everett, I think the company is a little earlier in the commercialization and venture-backed fundraising phase than we typically talk to here on Upside. And maybe that's just the fact that it's one of these hard sciences models. But when we talk to Everett, I mean, he's a smart founder. He has a very measured approach, and he definitely knows the space. So when I think about potential shadows for Everett, I don't have any of him per se. I have maybe more shadows around the idea of a measured approach, smart, thoughtful founder blending into the grow at all costs Silicon Valley venture-backed model.
Well, Perceive sounds like one of these interesting origin stories that came out of a university and research there and is now being commercialized, has a couple of SBIR grants. You can't slur SBIR grants. It just turns into SBR. And what we hear from some companies that come out of universities is this difficult process of finding the commercial application that is truly valuable to a commercial partner. And what impressed me about Everett was that he quickly saw the need to do that and also quickly identified a few different customer types, customer segments that can genuinely find commercial use out of this product and is now developing it for them and not simply out of a research application.
I love that the big picture focus is on retail, but then you have this kind of little niche off to the side of museums. And it's not going to ever be $1 billion business just selling to museums, but it's almost the perfect customer for them, and it just fits really, really well with what they do.
Yeah, you don't hear museums as a customer very often. I was just also in a museum in Chicago, circling back to the front of the show.
Subtle brag.
We went to the Art Institute of Chicago. Beautiful place. And I'm always just so curious about how all of that actually works. You know, like how close are museums to going under at all times? And maybe the answer is not at all. Maybe some museums are like really great sustainable businesses, but it always seems like it's this thing that maybe not enough people go to. And sometimes some museums, not like the Art Institute of Chicago, some museums really look like they could use some cash infusion just to clean things up and keep the lights on. And some of them look pristine and amazing. But at the end of the day, I've always assumed they are completely grant and donor funded. And I don't know what that means for companies that have a product that serves that niche, whether they have so much grant and donation funding that they can pay for things like this. But it does seem like this serves a real need for museums.
Well, the good thing is that the three primary markets that Perceive is attacking are retail, events, and restaurants. And those all kind of, according to Everett, are merging into this experience space. So I don't know that it's important for the analysis of the business when we're looking at the opportunity size and what this business could become to look deeply into the museum space.
When we get into the opportunity, he mentioned that Perceive is 5 to 10 times cheaper than commissioning a study from an outside marketing firm. And as we went through the interview, it was clear that Perceive is a technical solution to what is being done by humans in the form of these studies a lot. And being 5 to 10 times cheaper and automating that, there's a clear value prop there that I really like, especially if these studies are $100,000 to $300,000 a piece. You might argue that, well, it doesn't need to be 5 to 10 times cheaper if that's what the total cost is. What I'm still a little hazy on is how many of those studies are happening each year and what that means for a total market size for what Perceive is trying to do.
So yeah, we did a bad job of asking questions about the opportunity size. But something else I was just kind of thinking about in terms of Perceive is how off the rack is this software? Is it just here you go, or is it very customizable? And my thought is that there's probably a certain level of customization, because he mentioned some customers want to know how long until someone is approached by a customer service rep, and some customers want exactly 3.5 minutes. And he mentioned these clipboards, and it seems like there's a lot of learning and onboarding time that goes into each client, as each client has different needs.
My expectation would be that these studies that are commissioned aren't being commissioned multiple times per year, and maybe not even every year. So something else we would need more information on is how often is one of these customers purchasing a $100,000 to $300,000 study at this point? How often do they wish they could be commissioning that? And now having Perceive installed and doing the job all the time, I think there's more value there than we even heard in the interview. I would assume so. But he talked about the direct, immediate ROI for a lot of these companies being that they save a lot of money on interactive elements or different elements of the store that are just not getting the engagement they thought they would. And so it seems like, if I'm a store and I'm saving $50,000 on part of the store that I put in that I thought was going to be valuable and it's not, you can really see the value of Perceive. But it's hard I had a hard time hearing the message or getting the message across on the website of, here's why you need this in your space.
Right. I want to hear more about the ROI from Perceive. I want to know specifically what customers are finding valuable and how they're measuring ROI. Because as we think about the clipboards, he mentioned that the people who are doing those analyses are giving recommendations, and that's the value add of having an expert come in. So I think, show me that Perceive is 5 to 10 times cheaper, sure, but show me that it's also 5 to 100 times better. And I think that as they grow and they have that data and they look forward, that's probably where Perceive is heading.
And this gets into one of my shadows on Perceive as a company right now. You ready for this, Eric? Blah.
I thought we kicked the wah sound.
Blah. That's the shadow noise.
Okay.
The team right now is small, very effective, 4 engineers, Everett and 3 other engineers. Their website, beautifully designed. And, as we talk about wanting to hear more of these case studies and see more of the data behind this is what our customers have done, I think that is something that somebody really leading a sales or outward marketing effort, even if it is, B2B, I think that's something that can be really dialed in with somebody focused on it full time. And as this company looks to grow and expand and raise a seed round, he mentioned that they're looking for a sales-focused product person. And I hope that person also, is really focused on messaging and marketing that solution to the customers, because I'm not saying I don't believe that value is there. I'm saying that I think the messaging of how that value can be experienced by the customers can be honed in a little bit more when you don't have the opportunity to talk to the founder for 45 minutes like we did.
I'd agree. Definitely some shadows, but that's part of the world of when you are pre-seed. There are some commercialization shadows. There's some market risk. I think that this is a product that when it finds its right customer and its right clientele could definitely boom. I think that the ease of buying on the internet has made the in-person experience significantly more important, and companies that grasp that and understand that are going to thrive, and they're going to want to do it in a data-driven way. I think Perceive gives them that ability to use data to drive in-store decisions that drive engagement and conversion rates to sales. So I see the problem. I understand the problem. I think it's real, and I think the retail market in general is just massive. So I think that it is a large problem. It's a real problem. And delighting the customer is something that every retail company wants to do.
Opposite of a shadow, something I really liked about this interview was there were a couple moments when Everett pointed out why this is specifically a good time that has enabled this company to exist. One of them being, as you mentioned earlier, this 2012 watershed moment of transfer learning. The second one being where he sees things trending in terms of physical space and what people are going to want to do with physical space. So as we've talked about recently on the show, Eric, this founder market, almost timing fit, that box was checked for me as we went through this, hearing like, okay, this does sound like a unique time where he started as a freshman studying this. That was the same time that this watershed moment was happening. He's been working on it for 6 years, which is the length of time that this field has been relevant, and he has a beat on where things are going.
So Jay, we kind of talked about this, so I'll make mine quick. 6 to 18 months from now, I want to see more business cases. I want to hear more specifics. I want to learn more about what customers are saying and what customers are finding extremely valuable on the insights developed by Perceive? What are you looking for?
Very much the same. I want to understand better what the plan for customer acquisition is and how big that market opportunity is if they saturate it really well. Right now, you said that acquisition is word of mouth. And as this company grows and scales, they'll need to create more of a system and a process for onboarding and getting in front of new customers.
And I know this is how we usually end. We usually end with the 6 to 18 months question, but I got one little piece of insight that I wanted to drop in here as well. That wasn't really a key focus of the interview, but I think that the data collected by Perceive, if they reach scale or reach certain brands, is incredibly valuable. I think about its value to someone like a Circle Up, who's a data-driven retail investor who we've had on the podcast. I think about the value to hedge funds. There's I forget the name of the satellite company, but the one that scans Walmart parking lots to predict the next quarter's returns using hedge fund models. I think they actually got bought by a hedge fund. So this kind of data that's an alternative data source, as our friend Rachel Carpenter from Intrinio would tell us, could be a data source that is extremely valuable for Perceive should they store it that way.
Love it. All right, guys, if we missed anything, let us know. You can tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm, and we'll talk to you next week.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way.